USC, they're currently 1-2 right now in Big Ten play, right? And I think that it's fair to say that Big Ten football right now is just too much for the Trojans to handle, because the style of football that you gotta play in the Big Ten is way different from the style of football that Lincoln Riley has been accustomed to when he was coaching in the Big 12 at Oklahoma and when USC was playing in the Pac-12 in previous years. When you play in the Big Ten, you got to be tough up front. You got to be physical. You can't be missing tackles on defense. And you got to put more emphasis on running the football. One thing that is really noticeable when you watch USC play in Big Ten matchups this year is that Lincoln Riley is too finesse when it comes to his play calling offensively. He wants to beat you on the perimeter. He wants to beat you with speed and with how well his passing game is. Well, this year, USC is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten when it comes to their commitment running the football. They're second last in the Big Ten Conference when it comes to rush attempts per game. The only team that runs the football less than USC is UCLA. They're 115th in the FBS in rushing attempts per game, and they're 5th in all of college football in passing attempts per game. That shows you that the mentality that Lincoln Riley has isn't winning football in the Big Ten Conference. Look at Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State. Some of the best teams in this conference, they run the football a lot. They have the ability to play complementary football. USC, it's not like their rushing attack is non-existent. They do have a really good stable of running backs, and they have shown that they can run the football if need be. But Lincoln Riley gets too pass happy, and he wants to beat you throwing all these quick passes, these screens, these conservative checkdowns, and it doesn't help USC win these kinds of games that you lost against Minnesota, where it comes down to if you can impose your will up front, if you can have some ability to take time off the clock, can you be able to play bully ball? USC isn't that kind of team. They're one of those West Coast teams that they're flashy with all these nice receivers, all these speed guys, but they don't have strength up front offensively. And that's why Lincoln Riley has the mentality that he has. He knows that USC isn't good enough to hold up front in this conference, which is why he continues to call these plays to take advantage of what he feels these opposing defenses don't have, which is speed on the perimeter to slow down these wide receivers. When I thought about USC coming into this season, I felt like the big advantage that they had on the Big Ten this year was going to be having a guy as dynamic as what Zachariah Branch is, because the Big Ten, as tough as what this conference is, they're not used to seeing the kinds of players that Zachariah Branch is. Really dynamic, super fast, hard to get your hands on, and that's the advantage I thought that USC had. But so far, you haven't really seen too much of that advantage playing a part in some of their games this year, because it gets neutralized. When you're going up against teams that can just eradicate your pass protection, their offensive tackles haven't been good. You have to bench your left tackle in the second half against Michigan because he was getting tortured by Josiah Stewart. It shows you that the kind of game planning that Lincoln Riley has used in the past isn't working now, because he doesn't have any faith in his offensive line to hold up, which is why he's not committed to running the football. If you want to win in the Big Ten, two things you got to be is tough up front, and you got to be able to establish that run game. And even when USC has success running the football against Minnesota, they just will go away from it. And defensively, as good as a defensive coordinator as what D'Anton Lynn is, this defense still is having their fair share of struggles. They're not bad as what they were last year under Alex Grinch. This is a night-and-day defense that the Trojans have. You know, they are bigger. You can see improved defensive line play, and you do see better secondary play with less coverage bust. And USC, their strength on defense is their secondary. Their weakness is that They still aren't that good against the run. Against Michigan on that final drive, what helped Michigan win that game was that you had a big missed tackle that allowed one of their running backs to get them in the red zone and ultimately get the game-winning touchdown. You are giving up 158.6 rushing yards per game. That's 76 in college football. Against Minnesota, they had 193 yards on the ground against you. You gave up 290 on the ground against Michigan. When you're going against these Big Ten schools, no matter if you're going up against a Minnesota, a Rutgers, a Penn State, or Ohio State, they all have a similar identity. They may run their offensive slightly different, but one thing that you can see from every team that actually has a winning record in the Big Ten is that they all have the ability to play smash mouth football. And if you can't play smash mouth football, you can't play grown man football, you don't have the boys in the trenches to hold up playing this kind of physical football, you're not going to have a lot of success. It is the identity of the Big Ten Conference. And when you don't have a certain identity that fits what this conference is, you're going to struggle. In some capacity, watching USC in the Big Ten, you see a giant outcast because you see a team that doesn't have the personnel that equates to winning football playing in the Big Ten. In the Big Ten, you got to be tough, you got to be physical, and USC, they just don't have the ability to be that. You can't bully a team to death. You can't just maul guys up front because you don't have the players to do so. And I kind of overestimated how difficult the transition to the Big Ten from the Pac-12 was going to be for Lincoln Riley and company. I don't see this being a playoff team anymore. If anything, they have officially been eliminated from playoff contention. Even if you do beat Penn State, you're probably going to have a couple of other losses along the way. You probably are going to be a 4-loss team this year. I don't know if you're going 7-5, but there's a strong chance of it happening. But I still can see you finishing this year going 8-4, maybe 9-3, best case scenario. But so far this year, we've seen that USC, they just aren't really ready for the kind of football that gets played in the Big Ten.